standing in today for Councillor Bob Slay, who is away. So, as I say, we've got a packed agenda today, so please bear with me as well as we're getting through everything. I am ably assisted by colleagues here, so they may well prompt me at certain points. I see someone else just, Councillor Bird is just joining us, so welcome.
Just need to your mic, please. Trying to hear Mike.
Okay, so we'll get moving. So first agenda on the item is item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Slay and Sue Summers. And we have Councillor Thompson joining online and Paul. Thank you.
Lovely. So welcome to those online, and please indicate if you wish to speak at any point during the meeting. Okay, so we've done the substitutions. Any declarations of interest that need to be declared at this point? Everybody's covered. Okay, item 4 then, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of April. Okay, so is that a true, those that were here, is that a true reflection of the meeting? I know there were a couple of items that were asked for further information, so we're expecting a couple of updates.
Sorry,
Okay.
there's that one I kept going on about it, but that disposal of the land sites report was supposed to come back to this meeting.
Yeah, item 55. I think they've had, as far as I'm aware, they've had insufficient time to prepare. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was looking around the room, but I think colleagues are not seeing it. So I know that a paper went to executive board, Derek, but it wasn't. That hasn't been sufficient time to then go to investment panel and make a call. But I do know that it was received last Wednesday, so it's been written. I can try and get one of the housing colleagues to update.
No, that's fine.
And housing colleagues may join us later anyway, so we could check that. Okay. Right then, item 5 is the investment programme update and dashboard. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the programme update first and see if there's any questions and move on to the dashboard. So funding commitment is unchanged, £853.7 million versus the income streams of 71. The remainder fully utilised by earmark contributions approved by CA board. Costs incurred of the drawings to 31st of May were £507.3 million. The claims generally received on a quarterly basis as the repay. So I would expect that we'd see a jump as the June figures are reported, which is likely the next board. Since the last update, which was April, board has been sitting obviously, and chair section 151 officer been working under delegated approval of this board. There's only one item that was approved during that time. It was a change request amending the Coventry City Centre South project milestone dates. That was something that investment board had previously approved a change request in October 22. That was done for commercial reasons to ensure that the developers' dates aligned with those that received. The investment board are asked to note that the Combined Authority are in the process of complying with an interim gateway review of the investment programme that's been applied to all combined authorities under our agreements with His Majesty's Government to receive our devolved monies. The interim review will complete in February 24. That will involve valuation of some of the projects, investment programme issue information balance once the detailed valuation. I'd like to thank the local authorities corporation and their schemes that they're promoting. It's very important that it continues because we are judged on progress of those projects and the value for money that they create. The dashboard, if there are any
Any questions? Any questions, members? Nope.
Good, always good. So on the IP dashboard, investment program dashboard, there's 82 projects. On the 20 projects have reached completion stage funded by the investment program. We need to carry out evaluation of those projects. There's a slight verbal update on one minor matter, the Friargate project, which is a Coventry project, where we funded phase 1 and the proceeds from sale or refinance roll on to the further buildings. Investment program put £51.2 million into that. There was a milestone date for the completion of building C10, one we financed, the first one we financed. I believe it was due to complete 1st of May. The building is very good. I've been around it. There's some problems connecting power with National Grid. It's purely a timing matter, so they can't sign up under completion. So it's being extended by a couple of months. Red status projects, there's 13. Those are on completion only. The majority, the previous ones we haven't read, have been cleared through change of press. This one, the reason the red flag red is it's on completion date only, with a squared 6 month difference. There's 6 of those projects, the sprint projects, are all subject to the same change of press, which is currently being done. Insurance appraisal.
Further questions on that, members? That section? Nope. Okay, everybody's happy, so thank you for the update, Ian. We've got items 6, 7 and 8. So the dashboards that Nick Oakley usually presents. Now he's not going to be arriving to the meeting until a little bit later. So they're usually taken and then people ask questions in the private section. So unless there's any questions at this point, I mean, it's difficult. We prefer Nick to be here. So he will cover that when he gets here later. Okay. So in terms of substantive items for consideration today and decisions, we're moving now to item 9. That's on page 41 to 62. So Commonwealth Games Legacy Enhancement Fund Summary Report. So I'm going to pass over to Ed, as it's Ed's presenting on this one.
Thanks, Councillor Gristle. Yes, we thought that it would be useful to kick off the next suite of items on the agenda with an overview, just to remind members about the Commonwealth Games Legacy Enhancement Fund overall. And then we've got, I think, 8 business cases that all relate to this particular programme. So just to give some context, I think most people will know that there was underspend in relation to the Commonwealth Games to the tune of £70 million. That funding has now been confirmed both by DCMS and HM Treasury, and that we have really since autumn last year been discussing plans as to how that should be spent. At the Combined Authority Board in December, we agreed to allocate that funding against 4 different pillars. The pillars are set out in the covering note. And then at the Combined Authority Board meeting in March, we then made detailed allocations against a number of programmes. All of those programmes, again, are set out in the 2 tables that are in the report at item 9. What we agreed in those 2 Combined Authority Board meetings is that then we would bring detailed business cases against each of those programmes to this investment board. So 8 of those detailed business cases are coming today, and there are a further 4 that will come to a future investment board meeting. Each business case has been through the SAF process. Each business case is actually quite different in its nature, and so we need to look at each of them and the bespoke arrangements against each of them in their own right, which is what we're going to be doing over the next few minutes. But I think it's also worth flagging that in order to drive efficiencies across the whole programme, there are a number of things that are being done centrally, if you like, as a core team, to really make sure that we get coordination across the whole programme. Those things pertain mainly to risk management. So that's being done centrally. Evaluation as well. There's a lot of coordination going on around the evaluation side of things. Obviously, ongoing engagement with government and DCMS in particular. And there are a number of programmes where there are some obvious shared roles. So what we've done is said to certain programmes, you need to sort of make sure that you actually share a role in order to deliver your programme. So that's the kind of current situation. I think the last thing to say by way of introduction is that, as I said, just last week, we got final approval from DCMS and Treasury for the funding. There are some significant constraints that have been applied by DCMS all the way along, not least the fact that all the money has to be spent by March 2025. So that's, I think, a headache, and why it's so important that we drive so many of these business cases through this meeting. It's why they're all coming at once, because we've got to get spending as quickly as we possibly can. But I think most of the programmes that are coming today will be good to go, subject to approval from Investment Board today. So I think that's all I need to say by way of introduction. But we thought it was important just to set these next items in context. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Ed. And obviously, clearly, it's 70 million, a lot of money. Good to have that legacy funding, and hopefully we can do a lot of good things with the money. So first of all, I'll see if there's any questions for anybody at this point. That's a sinking.
Yeah, thanks. I welcome that. And because it's so time constrained, if there's hopefully there's no underspend, but if there is underspend, is there a possibility for us to transfer funds to make that facility? Because the last thing we want to do is to send a single penny piece back to government, irrespective of which government's in control. We need to make sure that we get the best value for money. How will it be audited back? I know there's a board that's set up, and it'll probably have to go through the leaders. But we need that flexibility. Far too often we come to Investment Board and we're asking for change requests. Is that facility available for? Because again, we actually want to get the delivery quickly as possible on the ground.
Okay, Ed. Yeah, and I know that's a very relevant question. At the point I was going to make to Ed, following on from that, was I think for each individual case that's coming forward today and the 4 future ones, we need to be absolutely clear where the oversight will be and how, and if it needs to come back to board at any point. But that we'll do that as we go through each item. But if Ed can take the question.
So I think in general terms, yes, it's fair to say that we'll be monitoring each of the programmes very carefully. And if it does look as though there's going to be underspend against any particular programme, we will look to resolve that quite quickly, both immediately with the programme, whoever's leading the programme itself. But if it appears that that's going to underspend, even within 6 months or a year, we'll then look at possibilities for transferring that funding and switching that around between the different programmes.
And presumably, if you earmark where the money is going, if the programme goes beyond 25, presumably if you've earmarked it, as long as it meets the conditions, then you've probably covered what you need to do.
Just to be really clear, expenditure can't go beyond March 2025.
It's planned.
Even if it's planned.
Okay.
I think there's only one exception, which is the reporting around the European Athletics Championships. We've got some concessions with DCMS around that, but beyond that, everything else has to be spent within the time period, which is why we need to monitor these things very carefully so that we can make any transfers that we might need to do between programmes in the meantime.
Okay, I think that's clear. That's simple.
Just another question. We need to also make sure that we do scrutinise inflationary pressures, because then if there's inflationary pressures built in, there's less spend and less delivery. So we need that to be reported back as well. So especially with schemes that I'm going to be going for, if there's any major infrastructure stuff. I know that in the previous paper there was lots of stuff talked about HS2. I'm a bit concerned about that overspend.
Not here.
No, it was in the papers before, but that has an impact on it, especially on costs. We need to make sure that that's reported back as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, noted. And hopefully inflation's going down. So hopefully we're going in the right direction. Okay, right. So can we move on then to item 10? So it's going to be the first debate. Oh, Sorry, beg your pardon. Oh, Councillor Hughes, is it?
So I have to speak up. Can you just clarify where the 2.5 million in?
You'll need to use the mic.
They can't hear you on the screen.
Can you clarify where the 2.5 million in item 12 relates to the tables in item 9, please? Just to clarify that. It's 2.5 million going to the Global West Midlands Strategic Outline case. I was just wondering where that fits in with the allocations that have been made under item 9.
Yeah, it sits within the economy, trade and tourism pillar. The fourth element of that is for 2 million. That's where that particularly relates to.
It says 2.5.
Can you help me with where the other 0.5 goes? So that
Yes, so just say what we're asking for is the 2.5 million under item 12. So that's 1.8 million for West Midlands Growth Company, and then the £700,000 to go to local authorities. So this should say 2.5 million here, or else it should say.
So the number in the table.
I think it must be, yes.
You're incorrect.
Yes.
Okay.
Lovely. So sorry, Councillor Burnett.
It may be that I've missed it, but how do people access the funding that we're allocating?
Can we take it on each item?
Each item is relevant, I think. How do people access the funding on each of the items we're listing? See, when we first talked about this, Ed, it was a 70 million, and we're going to top slice that to Birmingham, 25% to Birmingham, and the remainder was going to be shared out to the rest of the combined authority. Whether that ever happened, I don't know. I don't think I've missed any meeting, but it's certainly gone past me. But I just want to know how people access the funding out there in the community.
So it depends on, so what was agreed at the March board meeting. First, let me clarify the 25% that's gone to Birmingham City Council is completely separate from this. That underspend went direct to Birmingham City Council. This is the 75%. If you're going to break it down in that way, the 70 million represents the full 75%. If you want to look at it in those
Just to
terms.
clarify that, Ed, so it's only 75% of the 70 million, not the 70 million total.
No, there was 90. It was about 90 million in total, and this represents the 75%. And then what we agreed at the Combined Authority Board is that would be broken down into, is it 12 or 13 programmes? I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it's 12 or 13 programmes. Each of those programmes has its own mechanism for distribution. So that's why each of these business cases that we're going to go through over the next little while will each have a mechanism through which that is either doubly devolved to local authorities, or there is another way in which community groups, voluntary organisations and so on will be able to apply for or access that funding. But it depends on each programme as to exactly what the mechanism is for distribution.
Sorry to be pedantic, Chairman, but the whole point is that we've only got a certain time to spend the money. And if we make it bureaucratic, which we appear to be doing so, then the chances of spending it are getting minimal. It's important that the people out there, whoever they are, who want to bid for this money, need to do it simply and quickly. And it doesn't appear to me that we've got either of those right yet.
To be fair, I think that's what we're here to do today, is get the whole process moving today. So unless, Ed, do you want to come in and answer?
That's exactly right. As I said before, each of the 8 programmes that are before us today is ready to press go. in order to get that funding flowing as soon as the investment board today agrees on each of these programmes. And as we go through, colleagues will explain exactly what that mechanism is going to be and how quickly that's going to happen.
Councillor Simpkins.
Think it, to expedite it, want to be better to work with the local authorities in each pillar to deliver that, because we know best what's on our ground and then report back up. I think that'll be the best way to expedite any bids that come forward. We can do the work together with the combined authority so as we can actually deliver exactly what we're saying we're going to deliver. Because if you have a protected bidding system that comes through, it's going to take forever for us to do it. So shouldn't we discuss the finer details in the closed session, because we don't want to set any hairs running? Sorry, Chair, but I do think, you know, the combined authority do utilise the local authority enough with regards to delivery.
Each of the programmes has a particular mechanism. We've already been working very closely with local authority officers as to, depending on the nature of the programme, exactly how that is going to be administered. So as we work through each of them, we can explain to you exactly how that's going to get going. And colleagues, I can just say, if you could explain how you've been liaising with local authority colleagues in each case, so that you can have some assurance that we have been working very closely with your colleagues in order to make sure that the funding is spent as quickly as possible. But those conversations have been happening, which is why you've got the business cases in the way that they're formed now at this meeting.
Okay, so can we, I think, as I said right at the beginning, we've got £70 million on offer. We need to start the process of getting these projects moving. Today, work has already started. Today is the first part of the process to get this moving. So I'd like to do that if we can move on to item 10, first of all, which is community environment. And who's doing? So Richard Rees at the end of the table. So Richard, can you introduce your paper, and then as you've just heard, the request has been made. So we've got to this point, and the next where the oversight will be. Go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm Richard Rees, Programme Manager in our Environment team here at the CA. Jackie Homan, Head of Environment, also Project SRO. So the recommendation here is for the board to approve the Community Environment Fund business justification case for delivery of a £1.2 million programme, obviously funded through the Commonwealth Games legacy funding. So the Community Environment Fund would aim to deliver a programme of approximately 5 large and 30 small community initiatives by March 2025. And the overarching purpose here is to create a better environment and improve people's lives. This programme aligns with the wellbeing and sustainability pillar of the Commonwealth Games, as well as the breadth of the now well-established WMCA Environment Programme that's been working over the last 3 years with local authorities and partners to define the scope of that. So the fund, the journey that we've been on over the past couple of years is actually an existing community green grants programme that had £725,000 funding from the WMCA, and that's been running since March 2022. With delivery of over £460,000 now, of that total 725, and we've been able to fund 16 small and 2 large green grants programmes, which provide better access to green space to communities across the region. And the outcomes of this programme to date are listed under 2.4 on page 64 of the agenda pack, and that includes 150,000 people being directly engaged in green space, 40,000 working directly with the activities that have been developed, as well as 2 kilometres of river restoration and 20 hectares of green space improved. And we've been able to take on board feedback through that green grants programme to inform the shape of the Community Environment Fund. And we've also got a whole list of projects that we haven't been able to fund because of the criteria set through the community green grants being quite rounded around access to green space. We've got a much broader focus through the Community Environment Fund. So we've already got a list of projects that could come forward quickly under that new funding programme. So the new scope of the Community Environment Fund, as I mentioned, covers the breadth of the WMCA Environment Programme now. So that's around natural environment. So we expect to see projects that will help to protect, restore and enhance nature and wildlife. circular economy, so projects that help reduce waste and keep resources and materials in use for as long as possible. Climate adaptation projects that make communities more resilient and prepared for the impacts of climate change. And as I say, we'll retain that access to green space focus in this breadth of the scope of the Community Environment Fund. And then finally, we will see projects around environment awareness as well, so projects that directly engage people to improve their knowledge and support behaviour change in relation to the environment. So there'll be a total of £925,000 available through the programme, and grants will be similar in size to the Community Green grants, so we're continuing that learning. It's worked well. Small grants of up to £25,000, large grants of up to £100,000. And as I say, we expect the balance will be about 5 large and 30 small grants, but it will depend on what. In order to deliver the programme and speed being of the essence, we're going to continue the model that we've used through the Community Green grants. So we've got a grant administrator that will work to do the due diligence, but also the financial appraisals and monitoring, and that's something that we're continuing to build into this programme. In terms of staff to manage and deliver this, we've got a Green Grants officer now, and we'll retain that post. But we also want to bring in a Community Environment Fund manager that would support the breadth of this programme, but also ensure that there's both additional impacts that we can realise through this by bringing partners together, but also help us to secure further funding as well. So we've already had some initial discussions with potential funders across the usual funding groups, but also private sector bodies. And the objective that we've included in this business case is for at least an additional 500k per year from the end of this Commonwealth Games funding. So we see that as bringing good value for money long term. We'll also continue to support communities in the webinars that we run and outreach sessions with them, and we can tailor that to support where we see lack of applications coming in from across local authorities, and all that's available online. So we've been doing that through our Green Grants programme. We've got a wealth of information that communities can use now to build an application. And on the local authority point, we have at the moment an agreed representative from local authorities that when we get an application in from a community project and we see that this should be put forward for approval, we will actually speak with the local authority representative and say, is this a good project that would represent the needs of the local authority? Are there any issues that we need to be aware of? So before it gets put forward for approval, we're doing that due diligence across the board from both financial, but also the practicalities of the delivery as well. And then finally, we have a grant assessment panel that's made up of subject matter experts who can assess this from a more technical perspective to make sure that it's fulfilling the needs of the funding. The proposal's been endorsed by the Environment and Energy Board back in March, and would also continue to report back into that board on a quarterly basis in line with delivery as well, with representatives from across the local authorities making up that board, and obviously any other reporting required. We'd like to go live as soon as possible, but likely to be in October once we've got everything set up and ready to run, and obviously need to be fully spent by March 2025. So I'll pause there for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions?
The table on page 67, can you explain what's meant by direct resources? Does it relate to the staff that you're referring to?
Yeah, that's the staff costs that I refer to.
Just seems a lot of money. We're almost, it's like almost a third of what we're actually giving out, isn't it?
Yeah, this was picked up at an earlier point as well when this was developed through the approval processes. The reason it represents slightly higher than you'd normally expect is because that Community Environment Fund manager that we want to be able to bring in to secure the extra funding across the programme. So I mentioned one of the objectives is after this £1.2 million of funding, to be able to have a rolling programme that goes beyond, and we could bring funding in to support other projects and local authorities. So we've already had initial conversations with one funder indicating that we might get 500,000, but we think there's a lot more money out there that other private sector bodies, other funders could bring in. So some of that funding of the direct resources is to go and do that chasing, so we get longevity and legacy beyond this Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund.
Councillor Simpkins.
Just on that point, you do all this work and then you go and talk to local authorities for the delivery arm. Why don't you just let the local authorities deliver it? So they give us more resource actually where it's needed. There's 5 projects. There's seven councils that make up the combined authority. That's not discounting the shires as well. So where does that fit in? You're asking me to agree something and I don't know the real detail, the value for money and our credibility moving forward in the communities. Surely we've already got people who can talk to communities and say this would be a green grant stuff. Why not utilise the existing stuff that we've got and give us more delivery actually out of the allocation that's been granted here today? It just seems to be lots of crossover and you've got an extortionate amount of money, 1.55, that's going into staffing levels that the local authorities already got. Why replicate the wheel? Why reinvent it? If it ain't broke, they'll fix it. Surely they should be working with the local authorities in Anstey. And again, I'll come back to the central point. We know what's best in our community, so why don't you let us have the resource and let us crack on with it to deliver for everybody and then come back? What's going to be allocated into the shires? Surely the shires should benefit from this. This seems to be about doing stuff backwards just to justify the combined authorities got its take on it. Oh, I ain't bothered about that. I'm bothered about the delivery. We're taking more resources out for staffing levels that exist already in local authorities. That'll be more delivery.
I'll let Ed talk and then I'll come in.
I think Ed wants to come in here.
We had this debate at board meeting in March about the extent to which we wanted to just simply carve the 70 million and split it out across the local authorities versus actually having targeted programmes in the way in which we have set them out here. We could, under every single item as we go forward, have the same conversation about would it be better to spend the funding as we're describing in these business cases that have been through the SAF process and have been evaluated in terms of value for money, or should we have just carved it up and amongst the 7 local authorities? That conversation was had in March, and now we have responded to the Combined Authority Board's direction, been away and developed each of these business cases. Now, I think it is absolutely right that members should scrutinise, in the case of each of these business cases, the extent to which we are engaging with your local authority officers in order to make sure that the funding is reaching the places and the paths that it needs to reach. But I don't think under each item we can keep going back to the same principle as to whether or not we should even have this programme, because that was actually decided at the March board meeting. So I don't know, Richard, if you want to respond to Councillor Simpkins' point about how we're engaging with Wolverhampton in order to make sure that the projects that we've got that are already coming down the pipeline are being evaluated and assessed and used effectively. But you know, I think every single item we're going to come up with the same thing. Should we just distribute the money across the 7 local authorities? We're going to get stuck on every item.
This is important because, as I understand it, or as I look at page 64, I see £120,000 and 155 being taken out of the money available. I got that right? Good. Not really good at figures. But when I go to the next item, which bothers me even more, I see 800,000 being taken out, along with 450 and a further 150,000. So, you know, you've got 1.3 million coming out of the money available. And just seems a bit perverse to me. I'm going along with what Steve Simpkins saying, really. Would there not be? I understand what the board said in March. I was there. But at the end of the day, I don't think these figures, unless you can correct it, these figures of administration costs were available to us. And if they were, I think somebody would have questioned that. Secondly, would it not be possible just to allocate a funding pot to each local authority and say, right, that's ring fence for this purpose? It just saves all, you know, I mean, in the next item, there's another 1.5 million for round figures, a bit short of that, that would be available to be spent with the local authority resources we've already got.
So I think that is a legitimate question for each of the different programmes as to the extent to which the administration costs of each programme are justifiable or not. As I say, the single assurance framework process has identified, has worked through each business case and has said that they do believe that those administration costs are justifiable, but it is only right for those to be challenged and questioned at this meeting.
Okay, can I just ask Ed, within the cases you're putting forward, all those costs that identified, they've already been costed out? So it's a round figure for each one, isn't it? But each one will have been costed out. So the direct resources underneath it will sit some figures.
For each programme, yes. The administration costs against any given programme have been costed out, and they've been through the SAF process and they've been deemed value
Acceptable. Okay.
But as I say, it's the legitimate role of this board to question whether they think that's appropriate. The additional thing that I can say is that what we have also done, as I said in my covering report, is looked at where we can strip out some of those costs and join up certain posts. And there are 3 posts where we've said we shouldn't be having a similar post in 3 different programmes in order to create those efficiencies. But there are justifications as to why the different administration costs are as they are. As Richard has said, for this particular item, the officers have deemed that it would be worth spending £155,000 on an officer over those 2 years in order to try and raise the funds in order to extend the programme going forward. That's the legitimate, that's the argument as to why that post is being created. It's the right of this board to question whether that's right.
And are there any targets put into it for the future funds to be raised? Because there's almost you could be saying we've costed it 155,000, but if they then don't pull in any further funding, was it justified?
Richard.
Yes, I mean, in the business case, we've got as one of the key objectives of delivery is obviously the grants to be administered in total, but we've also got that as an objective to achieve that. And we're confident, given the conversations that we've been having today with another funder about this. Just to add, there's a level of evaluation monitoring built into that cost as well, so it's not directly just for staff. And I suppose, you know, if we were to look at another model of delivery, you need different community grants programs in each local authorities, and that would be 7 times the cost. Whereas actually we're trying to get efficiencies here through having one process overall that we can disperse the costs through. And we have a really good relationship that is not just with this programme, but across our counterparts in the local authorities to make sure that they're both raising awareness of this programme, but also telling us about projects and likewise in that due diligence process, making sure we get good quality projects that can be delivered that represent value for money for this 1.2 million. Because it's not a lot actually. The community environment fund. It's we're really confident that we can spend it, given the conversations we've had with other programmes of this size, more broadly in the West Midlands.
Okay, and presumably, sorry, Councillor Boyle.
I don't want to interrupt your questioning. I had my hand up earlier. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make a broad point really, and it's the near 7 years I've been a member of this board, I've never ever heard anybody say that while it's the right of this board to ask questions, and they can ask questions, dependent upon the answers will depend on the decisions or the recommendations that this board make. And if this board decides, and I'm with Councillor Simpkins and Bird on this one, they have the perfect right, Mr. Cox, to ask any questions they like. They equally have the right to make any recommendations they see fit to go further on to the combined authority. And if they're not satisfied with the answers they're receiving, then it's inherent on officers to bring that information forward to satisfy their questions. So we've had countless debates in here over the years. Some recommendations, most recommendations have gone forward, but not all. And the respect that is due to those questions should duly be given, really. So sorry, I don't want to give you a telling off, but I just think it's right that people remember that ultimately the combined authority is answerable to the elected members, and subsequently the questions and the discussion that takes place today will go forward to the leaders, and their decision may be influenced by the questions and the comments, the recommendations that are made here.
Can I just bring Carl in as well? Okay, Carl wants to do.
Sure. So just like to add in terms of the numbers in the reports of staff and admin, they are estimates at this point. As I mentioned, they will try and achieve efficiencies, and obviously we're obligated to achieve value for money against those. So where there are underspends on those cost headings, there will be opportunities to think about how to use those underspends in the future. And then just in terms of transparency, all of this will be reported to the financial management.
So not wishing to labour the point, but this money's got to be spent in 2 years. What about the staff that you take on when that 2 years has come to an end and they're still working here? Does that become part of the base budget? Or do we say your job's a fixed term contract? Because, you know, to be fair, I've just added two figures, items 9 and 10. I think there's 1.6 million in overhead cost and wages, direct costs. So what, oh, Linda's on the call now, she'll know. What is the situation after the 2 years has expired? What do we do with the people we're funding now? Are they existing employees? Are they new?
Linda, do you want to go?
Does
Yeah.
Linda want?
So any additional resource will only be brought in. Any additional resource required to deliver these will only be brought in under FT fixed term contracts to match when the funding expires. So there'll be no submission of inclusion of that into the authority's base budget. So there will be fixed term contracts to deliver these specific projects, and they will finish at the point where the project finishes.
That would have been helpful to be in the report.
Councillor Simkin.
I remember the March meeting, and most, if not all, the leaders questioned the admin costs across the whole of the split. And then now we can say exactly where it is. I think you're not utilising local authorities, and still no one's answered the questions about the shires. How does that fit in? I think it answers with the shire constituents members, but we giving out, we just like double cost. What's the cost to local authorities when they liaise with whatever officer in whatever pillar that we're moving forward? That's an additional cost to local authorities. If devolution and the combined authorities to mean anything, devolve it to us. We know what we're doing on the ground, no replication. You know, and there was never an answer on the admin costs. So I'd have to look at the board meetings when we asked the questions about the admin costs. I remember Ian Ward was quite vociferous about the costs. Yeah. So therefore, who has made this decision, or is this a proposal moving forward? Because if it's a proposal, then we need to think again, and the clock's ticking.
Yeah, the conclusion of the board meeting, we can look back at the minutes, was that you would, at this meeting, judge each of the programmes on the detailed admin costs against each one, and that's what's being presented here to you today. And as I said before, it is absolutely your right to question that and to challenge that, and so that's exactly what you're doing. Chair, I don't know what the kind of answer is to, you know, if members don't like what they see, how do we actually deal with that situation? I think we need to look at that. But the simple thing to say from my perspective is that we've got all these programmes lined up and ready to go. So if we have to bring them back to another board meeting, then that's going to be problematic. But we're caught in you know, the board said we need to present them. We are presenting them here this morning.
Right. Okay. Linda.
Yeah, it's just to come in on that really. So Absolutely. The WMCA board itself looked at the overarching principles of the programme. The specifics about actually how things are delivered and what they're going to deliver and how they will be delivered is the decision here today. So each individual project is coming for decision here today as to whether or not you are comfortable with the proposal about how this specific programme that we're dealing with today, this specific item that we're talking about now, are we comfortable that this is the right way to deliver it? Now, obviously, officers around here have been working with local authority colleagues, have produced a proposal that says, actually, from a West Midlands perspective, this is the best way we are saying as officers to deliver this specific programme across the region. But clearly, and as Carl's just said there, we will only actually charge actual admin costs. So, you know, that they're estimates, but we'll only charge actual admin costs. But this is it's a clear decision for today about how do we agree about the proposal about how this specific project is going to be delivered today. If not, as Ed said there, if we're not comfortable and actually members feel that it could be delivered in a different way, then we will have to go back and work with local authority colleagues to come back with a further proposal. But at the minute, based on the conversations we've had with your local authority colleagues, this is the proposal that we are saying we think is the most cost effective and will have the biggest impact for the money.
Okay, Councillor O'Boyle, and then we need to get to a decision.
That's just reminded me about something, actually, what Linda's just said. And forgive me, I read it this morning, but I can't remember. What's the name of the fund that is replacing ERDF and ESIF?
UK Prosperity.
Yeah, which now comes through the Combined Authority to be distributed accordingly. And within the funds that is identified, an amount of that money is being held back by the Combined Authority in order to distribute it accordingly, which has raised concerns locally. I know I've raised it locally about just how much they're doing in order, what we actually getting for that. Now, I'm told, of course, that, well, hopefully you'll get some of that money back, but there's no guarantees that you will. Secondly, going forward, when we had the LEP organisation, which the money came through, locally, Coventry was the accountable body and distributed that money on behalf of Coventry and Warwickshire. We never held back one penny. So I do question, and I do take on board exactly the point that Stephen's making, that actually we're built now in a bureaucracy in order to give money out, but it should be spent directly. So I think there's a wider question here about just how the Combined Authority is operating and managing public finances on behalf of the public.
Sorry, Chairman,
Okay.
I promise you it'll be my last word, but I was just about to say exactly that, Jim. You know, we over many years have become accountable bodies for many streams of funding. And it seems to me, and perhaps somebody can tell me, my understanding of the board was that we agreed the principles of how this should be split into the pillars. Certainly, looking at this now, I would have thought that there may be a possibility of allocating each of these pillars to individual local authority to become accountable bodies for that. And the administration costs as such is likely that they would be absorbed, as Jim has said, within that local authority. I would have thought that's less, well, less erratic is one word, yeah. It's less onerous, and probably, I would think, would probably give us another couple of million quid to spend rather than have it spent in admin costs.
Linda wants to come in, and then I'm going to refer to Ian.
It's only just to be clear, when we're talking about admin costs, we're not talking about the Combined Authority me charging overheads into these funds. That's not what I'm doing at all. When we're talking about these costs, these are direct additional costs for administering these funds as the accountable body. I just want, there's a slight nuance in the word administration here. So I'm not using the funds to absorb WMCA overheads or to create funding for the WMCA. These are direct additional costs that the team are saying are required to deliver these programmes as required by the accountable body. But you're right, you know, everybody is clear. It's clear from a member's perspective that we have brought a proposal here today that says, working with local authority officers, this is the best way to deliver this fund. If members are not satisfied that, we will need to take that back away today and to revisit that and to look at what are the, to bring forward the additional opportunities or options around how this fund could be spent.
Karen, sorry, Karen, my hand has just been up for a while. It's just because I'm slightly confused by this debate, to be quite honest with you, in the fact that my understanding was that there was an already sort of a broader agreement of how the fund was supposed to be allocated as such. And I just think it probably would be helpful just to go to let the officers of the CA just to go through those programmes one by one. And if there's any ones that want separate debate on or parking or further conversation, that we do that and put those aside, because I think there are some good projects there that probably it would probably be useful for us to just go through them and have that conversation as listed on the agenda.
Thanks, Sharon. That's very helpful. Bear with me a moment because I just want to bring Ian into this.
It's danger prolonging.
Yeah, because I'm not going to keep going on about this all day.
In advance. Why are you looking at me?
Oh, well, I'm just looking all around, Councillor Burr, just looking all around. Just have to be there. Maybe I can see you easy with the glasses. Yes. I was just going to make a point. I mean, part of the reason that things are set up in this way, and I think we touched on it, is down to the way that when government allocates the funds at the moment, increasingly they talk about evaluation of value for money following the Treasury 5 case model. So a lot of it is dictated to us about how we go about that. It really is, I can see the expression, Councillor, but it really is quite painful. So I've gone through, costly, absolutely. There's a point being made, but I'm kind of going through the pain of it as an advanced gardening investment programme, and I've talked to your officers about it quite a lot in terms of logic models, following evaluation, different types of assessment. And that would be a lot of pain if you spread things out over 7, when you've got one organisation doing a liaison and doing information for government. It is what they require for them to give us the money, that accountability and response. These are business cases individually, so perhaps it's a different debate. But I do want to make the point it's kind of part of this isn't necessarily our doing, the way that they want that proof of value for money set up. And your LEPs do know a bit about this because they were absorbing the pain and had various officers doing evaluation, etc. Some very good ones with that country I've dealt with. But they were a resource internally, and they were a cost to have to pay for. Sorry, I didn't want to go on. It's just something we seem to be missing.
Okay, so I want to now move on because we need to make a decision on this item. Ed, I just want to know, it will go, is it Environment Board this all goes through once a decision is made here?
Yeah, it has already been through Environment Board, so it's been through Combined Authority Board.
Yes,
and it's been through.
It's just who tracks it as the project moves on.
Go through Environment Board, yes.
Okay, so we can make a recommendation to the environment if we're agreeing this today. That's just Linda.
So just to be clear, today is the approval.
Yeah.
So the decision rests with Investment Board. So whilst Environment Board have commented on how it's being to be designed and delivered, and they will also see the monitoring of it, the decision as to whether or not this goes ahead is here today.
I totally understand that, Linda. I'm checking where the monitoring will take place.
Right, thank you.
So can I have a decision from the board, so whether they approve this item going forward and that the money is allocated, that we're approving the spend of 1.2 million?
Can I ask what the implication is of us not doing that?
Well, the project can't move forward.
Nobody's disagreeing with the principles of the merits of the schemes that have come forward. It's about the way that they're administered and who checks back. For me, I think we would get more delivery by actually devolving these
But
two.
that's not up for debate here
Well, it
today.
should be, because it's a
Well, we can
print.
have
I'm
that as
agreeing
a
a principle, and I cannot agree the principle of this. Again, at the March board, leaders really questioned hard about the admin costs. That takes away money from the actual delivery. I'm about the delivery that comes in the constituent part. For me, I cannot agree in principle or wherever, because this has never come back to leaders on which way you're going to give that delivery model. Now I'm understanding that there's so much crossover that can be done. Who then assesses the credibility of the scheme moving forward? It's about the communities in there that we're going to put these resources in. And I question mark credibility with regards to that, the way that this is done, because I can find a way that can be expedited quicker and also delivered cheaper, that gives more delivery across the combined authority. So I can't agree this at this minute, whether there's delay or not. We've had delay from day one with the underspending.
I'm looking for a practical way through this. But I think before I offer the practical way through, I do think we ought to just flag what are really quite existential questions about the combined authority itself, which we're raising through this particular item. The first is effectively how we deal with decisions that the combined authority board has made. The combined authority board has made decisions about how this programme should be taken forward. And whilst it is absolutely true that leaders quite rightly questioned that they need to see the detail of the admin costs, which we're doing through these papers today, I believe that the board made an in-principle decision to allocate this funding in this way and not carving it up between 7 authorities. So the first kind of existential question is, do we accept previous agreements that the combined authority has made or not? The second existential question is, government policy is that this funding and the UK SPF funding comes through the combined authority. It's not a question of, did government give us a choice between the combined authority or the local authorities? The government actually told us it has to come through, and we can't do anything about that. And then the third existential question is, do we trust the SAF process or not? Because each of these business cases has been through the SAF process, has been challenged and questioned as to whether or not this is best value for money. And that's true for all of these business cases before they've arrived at this meeting. So those are 3 existential questions as far as I'm concerned, which if we just throw them all out, we're actually asking questions about that. Now, the practical way forward, which I think is a legitimate thing for this board to do, is to say we don't agree with that administration cost, that 155,000, and we need to go away and look at that and look at whether or not that money could be spent in a different way, not appointing an officer, and perhaps looking at how we work with our local authorities to use that funding. That would be a way forward where we actually don't agree with that one particular aspect of this project.
Yeah, and that was going to be the question, if we can approve the item, but then have the 155,000 looked at and have further oversight of. So I think we're getting to a point where we could approve everything apart with it going forward to then look at that 155,000 and see if there's any reduction in that.
I just wondered if I could move an amendment then to that effect.
So
That's what you would
yeah,
do.
yeah.
And that is then put aside. And I think that would gain general support. That being said, I've got to say again, Ed, it isn't for this board. I'm reading I'm reading the recommendation. The investment board is recommended to approve. It's not ordered to approve. So
Because it's gone through.
otherwise, why does it come back here? It comes here for our recommendations to go forward. That is the point. Otherwise, you might as well just go to the leaders and just cut out the investment board. So we have a legitimate right to do that. And I think the way forward today is recommend that is as I said, is remove that amendment that the 155,000 is removed, maybe brought back at a later stage as to how that will be spent within the local authorities, or it's just cut out the budget altogether. But I'm not sure I want to rewrite the budget and the report here.
It probably can't be totally cut out, but it could be approved with the 155,000 details brought back of that part of the
Can I
statement.
suggest a way forward along the lines Jim has said?
Yeah.
And that all of these could be approved, subject to all of the administration costs and overheads being recommended back for the board to look at. The main board, that is. I mean, I know Ed said they've been talking to our local authority offices. We've got an old-fashioned thing in Walsall. Elected members are there, and officers make recommendations, elected members make decisions, you know, and that's what we're doing today. I think the whole question of the overhead will be there on every one of the schemes. So therefore, with Jim's permission, perhaps I can broaden that and say that we agree the schemes that we've got before us, but the admin costs and the staffing costs are collated back for the board to see at the main board itself, and then come back to this board. The leaders board, sorry.
Yeah. That sounds a fair way forward.
I think it's a fair way forward.
Oh, Linda wants to come in as well.
There's a practical challenge about it.
I suppose just a couple of things from me was one, difficult for us to proceed with no resources to proceed, but equally I think we can very quickly turn around, and perhaps we could do this through the financial monitoring report to the July board, the overarching piece that you're requesting about what is the totality of the resource and the administration costs across these funds. So we could do that back to July board. But from my perspective, it's be quite difficult for me to be able to say you can go ahead with these when the resources to deliver it haven't been approved.
Gary, did you want to come in?
Well, without getting into the politics of all of this and how the decisions are made, I was just going to make the obvious point that you've got 21 months to spend this money. And if you spend another 2 months arguing about how it's spent, and if the March 25 is a hard deadline, which I suspect it is, then you end up losing the money at the far end anyway. So it was just a point about trying to come to a conclusion on the timing.
Right, last question, then we take the decision.
It's a suggestion, actually. It was mentioned by the officer down there that the person employed with this money, with the Community Environment Fund, would actually be going out to apply for funding in future years elsewhere. I think that you know that they're going to have to find that the admin costs from trying to apply funding from elsewhere. In other words, we need more. We need more than that. But to my mind, our office would probably have tried to lever money against some of this. That they would have looked to try and find other ways of getting money in on top of this already. And I think the officer concerned should be doing that now.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we are in the conversations at the moment to try and do that. Makes sense.
So, members, can we approve the 1.2 billion to be spent on this project, with then the potential for, so we agree it, we're going to proceed with it, but then the board is asking for a report of future financial monitoring around admin costs. And that is a piece of work that will be done separately. We're approving that this goes forward and that they will then try and make savings where they can on this. But we will then have a future report around how those admin costs are being applied to programmes. Would everybody be prepared to agree?
I think
Because otherwise we're going to sit here all day and not get anywhere.
well, call me awkward and change habit of a lifetime. The fact of the matter is this: I think what the resolution before us, Madam Chairman, is that we agree in principle all the schemes here and how they'll be distributed, but we do that with the caveat that we have a report in the July board, I think you said, Linda, to bottom out the actual costs. So there's no reason why this shouldn't commence. I mean, I don't think you'll be spending this tomorrow. And we are in the middle of June now, almost into July. And when's the board? Is it July the 17th or thereabouts, Linda? We can.
Yes.
Linda?
And if we could just allow the piece, if assuming the decision is to go ahead with this specific one today, but just to allow only critical resource spend between now and the July board for when we bring the holistic position back on admin for July. Otherwise, I won't have cover to be able to sort of kick off and allow this project to go ahead. So if we could at least have the caveat that said allow only critical spend from now until the board has chance to see this in July, that would be helpful.
This is just a great example of how the Combined Authority has been since day one. Members are bounced into decision-making processes without the full facts, without the details, without the costs and without the delivery. I thought the Combined Authority was 7 Mets together making decisions moving forward. This is not. This is separation from the Combined Authority. I agree that we've got to move forward, and reluctantly I'm going to agree to the caveats that have been forward, but I'd like this to be on the agenda for leaders to discuss at liaison meeting and also on the agenda for the July board, because you're either going to be in a Combined Authority with the 7 Mets make decisions together, or you're going to be bounced in by officers. I'm really unhappy with the process that's gone forward. You seem to be discounting local authorities every step of the way for the greater good of the Combined Authority itself. Yeah, let me tell you this, the Combined Authority is nothing without the 7 Mets. So just be mindful of that moving forward. I'm deeply unhappy. And when people say we've got 21 months, which is quite right and factual, how long have we had this on the agenda to get done and ratified? It's been here forever and a day, and still you're discounting local authorities. So reluctantly, I'm going to agree, apart from the caveats that I've said, it goes to liaison meeting, it goes to board, so leaders can make a decision on this. Why not keep utilising the existing principles and systems that we've got in local authorities for the delivery? You can audit our books to make sure we're spending it in the right places. How can we audit this? So with them caveats, I'll move on from this, but nobody's disagreeing with the principles of the 7 pillars and the projects come forward. This is about the way that we deliver this for the best people and the credibility of everybody in the West Midlands. And I feel that my credibility is being tarnished here. And reluctantly, I'm going to have to move it forward and bounced into another decision. For me, that's unforgivable.
I don't think anybody's credibility
Well, I do. I think
potentially
mine
being
is.
tarnished. So, and I think there is a fair amount of oversight. There is the opportunity to bring these questions up at leaders. Okay, so can we agree then? We're agreeing 1.2 million. To go forward, we've asked for so that work can start. There is the caveat that we will, as Linda has requested, allow only critical resource spend. Then there will be a future report to the July meeting, and I hope that then covers some of what will probably come up in the remainder items, so we can keep it succinct. So everybody agreed?
Yep.
Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Right.
You wait till you get onto the next report.
Oh, well,
Well, Chairman,
that was
that's why-
supposed to be the easy one, people.
Well, that's why I moved this resolution that we did the same on all of them. You can accept the principle, but it's only the, you know, we can say we debated it all again.
Yeah, there may be other things that are brought up. So let's move on to item 11 then, inclusive community grants programme, business case from Bethan Stimpson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and address some of the points that have been made through the conversation so far as I go through, and then hopefully take questions. So I'm going to start off just talking through the process that we've been through to get to this stage so far. So my previous role before joining the Combined Authority was Head of Legacy for the Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games. This programme has been specifically designed with a view to addressing some of the challenges that were raised during the lifetime and immediately following the Games itself. The Games did a fantastic job of catalysing to slightly different ways of working and achieved lots of new things. However, as many of the people in the room will acknowledge, there were challenges that were raised, particularly at community level, of different groups that didn't feel that they did have the opportunity to engage financially with the Games as much as they would have liked. So again, this has been designed with a view to trying to address some of those challenges. So far, we have done quite a significant amount of stakeholder engagement, both politically and with those communities that I talked to. In particular, from a local authorities perspective, we have spoken with all of the strategic directors across the 7 constituent members, and again, sort of ad hoc conversations as well with the non-constituents as well. We've engaged with the Young Combined Authority, the Faith Strategic Partnership Group, our portfolio lead, Councillor Carmichael. And I'd also just like to highlight that we have separately set up a specific reference group which brings together chief executive and strategic director level staff from some of the key funding stakeholders in the region and nationally. So again, for example, those organisations like Sport England and the National Lottery Community Fund, amongst others. So again, this programme has been specifically designed taking account of the experience that I personally have from working on the Games and those successes, alongside the feedback and expert opinion of all of those different pieces of consultation that I've spoken to. We've talked a bit about numbers already, and there's been some challenges raised. So I'm going to start there with the table that is presented in the summary report. So in total, this project is 10.5 million of the overarching 70 million fund. This sits within the inclusive communities pillar. And again, that has influenced the design of the programme. This is very much about trying to do things differently, embedding inclusive practices. And I'm going to talk about a couple of examples of that as we go through the detail. So within the 10.5 million, as members have noticed, there are some costs that sit separately to the actual funds that will be distributed to communities. I would like to just clarify on point number 2 within that table, the grant administrator fee, which has obviously attracted some attention. That has been, again, deliberately designed in consultation with that special reference group. It is not a profit-making endeavour for the proposed administrator. It's not somebody that's going to come in and make a profit margin of 10%, 20%. It is pretty much being delivered at cost. I can reassure members of that, having received the procurement proposals already from a number of those prospective suppliers. It is also importantly, to that point I made on being inclusive, embedding those inclusive practices. The role of that administrator is to do the financial due diligence, which is not cost incurring for the Combined Authority were we to deliver it in-house, but it is also deliberately to try and do more in the community capacity building space, reaching out to cold spots that the Games wasn't able to work with, organisations and individuals that perhaps have historically struggled to engage directly with the Combined Authority, or indeed possibly local authorities themselves. And again, this really has genuinely been built based on that consultation with those members, again, both organisations and individuals. Moving down to item number 3, again, Ian Martin talked earlier about the importance of evaluation. There is an element of this being mandated by our funder, DCMS, but also this is about trying to demonstrate, again, that we are taking things forward from some of those cold spots that the Games wasn't able to address. Us as a Combined Authority and a collective group of local authorities as well, being able to show that we address some of those cold spots, being able to look our communities in the eye and say, actually, you gave us this feedback, and this is us creating a programme that now enables us to address those gaps that you highlighted.
Just jumping back up to number 1 on that table, which is the £9 million. That is the intention of minimum threshold of actual funds that will be awarded out across different community groups regionally. And then item number 4, finally, is the core staffing, which again is that internal combined authority staffing piece. I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight, and I think it's also relevant to the conversation we had already on the community green grants as well, which is as a result of the specialised staff that have already started working on this, we have already secured a £2.5 million investment from Sport England, who, as I said, are part of that specialised reference group. So there is already a really strong precedent for us being able to demonstrate additional inward investment from some of these additional funders regionally. And the intention of this fund is to continue being able to do that. So in a similar way to what Richard described on the Environment Fund, if we invest in having the right people at the beginning, the intention is this allows us to continue long beyond March 2025, embedding those learnings that the evaluation itself that I've talked about will enable us to make. I'm just going to talk about the thematic priorities within this fund. Again, they're presented in the paper, so I'll do a quick light touch. There are 3 key strands that are presented here. Again, we have worked really closely with the Environment Fund. It is deliberate that sustainability isn't presented. The intention is that there would be a signposting, flagging in the marketing materials on both programmes to make prospective applicants aware of both opportunities. So that's deliberately not presented. The 3 key areas are physical activity and sport, again recognising that the Games itself was the ultimate catalyst for this funding and is a major sporting event. Mental health and wellbeing, the Combined Authority has done a significant amount of strategic work trying to better align those 2 pieces, so we intend to continue that in this programme. And then finally, culture and arts. And again, you'll note in the agenda, we have got presentation on arts and heritage later on. And just to reassure members that those 2 pieces of work are in the same way with environment very much lined up. The Combined Authority Board previously made a commitment that against those first 2 buckets, the physical activity and sport and the mental health and wellbeing, that we would spend a minimum of £3 million out of that total £10.5 million budget. And again, the 2.5 million that we've secured from Sport England is on the basis that we will continue with that commitment. I've already talked about sort of the broad raison d'etre for this fund. So this is about trying to continue some of the impact that the Games has managed to generate. So there may well be projects that have previously secured investment as a result of the Commonwealth Games. This is an opportunity for them to continue that. And it also reduces the risk profile in terms of us being able to spend this money by March 2025. But then equally, as I said, plugging some of those gaps, the cold spots that the community themselves have made us aware of over the last 2 to 3 years. I've already talked a little bit about the management process, but I'd just like to again give some reassurance on that item number 2 in the cost table, the administrator. So there are 2 core components of that. That is the financial infrastructure, being able to demonstrate that the financial due diligence has been done in a robust and fair manner. We can demonstrate that we are using public money in an effective manner. And then the second point is that capacity building. So in practice, in layman's terms, what we're looking for is somebody to go out into those cold spots in person, go to community hubs, go to youth groups, work with people on their proposals so that we do see what we like to call the unusual suspects actually coming through this pipeline. The selection of the administrator themselves has already started on an at-risk basis. We will not move forward with awarding again until obviously subject to the approval of this meeting today. But it is an open procurement process, and therefore you'll notice that it's a circa 8 to 10% on the administrative fee within that cost table. That is to reflect that the ultimate value of that will be dictated by the market, but that process is still ongoing and is commercially sensitive. But I can again provide some reassurance to members that we are seeing a little bit of a reduction on that total 10% amount. So I do anticipate the value of that contract being closer to the 800,000 mark, possibly a little bit lower, rather than the 900,000 that we'd initially thought. So we'll continue to drive value for money in that area and all of other cost areas, as Carl and Linda have spoken to. In terms of the distribution of the funding, so we are really committed to this being a regional piece. Again, part of that cold spot identification is we know that Birmingham as an area generally did see a little bit more investment in the community space perhaps than the wider region. There are absolutely exceptions within that. The West Midlands Combined Authority Board on 17th of March agreed that this programme would speak to both the constituent and non-constituent local authority areas, and that is continuing to be the case as we develop the detail. There is an intention that within the contract with that grant administrator that I've talked to, that threshold and minimum requirement spends for local authority areas will be set. That'll be a contractual requirement that they will report to the combined authority on. In deciding what those allocations will be, there are three key cost components that have been considered. So I'll just run through those briefly, but I appreciate there may be questions, Chair. So number one was population size. That's simply to reflect the fact that some areas have more people than others, and therefore we may well expect more implications from them. Number two is the multiple indices of deprivation. Again, recognising that we've got a really broad range of different needs across the region. And then finally, a weighting in favour of constituent members over the non-constituent members. It is not our intention to advertise these numbers externally to members of the public. It will be a contractual requirement to the administrator. And that is quite a deliberate intention from us. That is to reflect, as members have referenced, we have a significant amount of funding to spend within a relatively short time period. So the intention was to present this as a threshold, a range for spending, and that will allow the administrator to operate with an absolute minimum, but with enough flexibility that we don't risk not spending all of the money by December 2024. I've just talked about December 24, that's just to provide a little bit of clarity. The intention is that the final funding grant to grantees on this programme would be December 24, with a view to that evaluation and demonstration of impact being prioritised from January to March 2025. We recognise there may be a little bit of overspill, but we have brought in a little bit of contingency within the delivery window to allow for that. So in conclusion, it is the intention that this fund would go live in September 23, again subject to an approval today. I know to recognise the comments that have been made in terms of administration costs so far. I hope I've gone some way to addressing some of those. However, I would just like to highlight to the group that in order for us to move forward and ultimately open this programme for grantee applications in September, we do need to move forward with the procurement of that administrator, again buying in their expert support, their financial due diligence, their even down to their application portal, which if we don't go with an external, we would need to create in-house within the combined authority. To do all of that, the intention would be that we would move forward with the contracting at the early stage of July. We obviously cannot do that if we have got a spend threshold caveat, but again, happy to take questions. And the last comment from me, I'd just like to share a slightly more personal story from one of the individuals that previously received grant funding from the Commonwealth Games, because for me it really encapsulates why we've designed this programme this way. I've changed the name of the individual for his protection, but when I was working on grant funding within the organising committee, was a young man, let's call him John. John was 16 years old. He'd already had a brush with the law. He already had a record of criminal activity. He was nearing expulsion from school and he had significant mental health issues as a result of all of that. And he just really had a pretty rotten time in his early stages of life. And the games acted as a catalyst, a little bit of a different brand, something different that this person hadn't been able to sort of engage with previously. This young man, as a 16-year-old, put his own application into one of the grant programmes that the Games itself delivered. He came in person, pitched it in a Dragon's Den style. He was successful, and through engaging with a community organisation, he was awarded £10,000. He set up an intergenerational walking group project at Hadley Stadium. The case studies are fantastic. I'm more than happy to share them because I'm very proud of the work that he did. But for me, again, that really explains why we want to do this in a different way. It's about trying to reach people that perhaps wouldn't have engaged with the combined authority, or perhaps wouldn't engage with the local authorities directly. And there are real late life case studies of people doing that. So I'll end on that note and over to you, Chair, for other questions.
Thanks, Beth, and that was a great story to end on. Let's hope there's lots more of those. Okay, members, questions for Bethan? Or are we happy to? Oh, perhaps go Boyle.
That's why I put my glasses on so I can see you miles down there. I've just for the benefit of the investment board, I've got a note because I've had a conversation with council officers in Coventry about this. And I'll just read the quick note. So it's a £10.5 million fund which would distribute £9 million in grants to the 7 LA areas based on the population size and constituent membership as was identified from the underspend of the Commonwealth Games. So we know that. Here's the point. We've requested the detail behind the grants, which is yet to materialise in this paper, as it only states aims, objectives, and the paper still hasn't set out that it will work closely with Coventry City Council's Culture, Sports and Arts Service or any other similar department within the local authorities. And the proposed governance we've requested rests solely with the grant administrator. So I suppose the obvious question is, exactly, you know, how is this going to be overseen? Because actually what you've just said isn't reflected within the report or within the recommendations that we're being asked to agree.
Okay, I take the point of feedback. It certainly is the intention for the Combined Authority and the grant administrator to work collaboratively throughout the delivery process. The grant administrator, in our view, and in the view of that specialised reference group that we've set up, needs to have enough authority and autonomy to be able to deliver what is actually quite a significant ask within a relatively short window. However, I do not say that with the intention of implying that local authorities will not continue to be engaged. Part of the reason that we have got that small allocation for core staffing is to ensure that there is somebody that local authorities can engage with. If you haven't had the detail and you would like to see more of that, I'm very happy to provide it, or I'm happy to speak to further detail in the meeting. But I can offer my reassurance that it is the intention of the Combined Authority to continue to work with local authority directors and lead officers as required.
Just to say, Ken, I'll shut up because I know colleagues will come in. But bearing in mind the conversation we just had in the previous one, we talk about reports, we talk about reassurance. You know, I've just reported back what council officers who work with Combined Authority officers day in and day out, and they're saying that, not me, and that concerns me now. So at the moment, I'm not in a position to agree that this should go forward, because you're talking about public money going to an unaccountable organisation that's not accountable here to anybody here. So once we agree this, that 10.5 million is gone. So that's what's bothering me.
Again, ultimately, the intention is that the grant administrator would have authority and autonomy to be able to deliver this within a really tight timescale. So yes, you are correct. Ultimately, there is a significant amount of devolved responsibility of this money to that external supplier. However, that is why we have done a really open, robust procurement process to ensure, as referenced a couple of times in the meeting, that value for money is being genuinely achieved. What I can commit to is being able to provide regular updates of what is being spent, what is that profile. And again, there is a really clear set of thresholds that it ensures a minimum spend across each of the different local authority areas, both non-con and constituents. But you are correct, it isn't the intention of the programme to come back to this forum or to a Combined Authority board to request approval on individual grants. To give a sense of scale, again, within the organising committee granting process, there were grants that went down in value to £1,500. I don't think, again, within the timeframes that we've got and the total value of this programme, that it's realistic to expect you and colleagues to be able to spend that level of time and detail on that type of value. So yes, you're correct. It is the intention to devolve this to the grant administrator.
You have said in your report, in your what you've said today, that there'll be contracts that local authorities will be expected to sign up to as part of this. I don't see anywhere in this report it says that. That's what you said.
So
this delivery partner will be given money. I don't even know who it is. That's just, Chairman. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Would you like to respond? You can respond to that. So again, I am happy to out of session talk about what the procurement process status is. We have gone live doing that process in tandem to hopefully seeking approval from this board. That is an open commercial process. I can't share that publicly today, I'm afraid. However, it is a competitive process that ensures that each of the applicants, and there are multiple, are able to demonstrate the value for money that they as a supplier would bring. My view on this is that it would ultimately be managed as a contract in the same way as the combined authority or any local authority would oversee a contract management piece themselves. I agree with you. We are ultimately
It doesn't say that in the report, though, Chair. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't say that. I'm only taking your word for it. I'm sure your word is very good, but it's not in the report.
I mean, in a similar vein to the previous item, could we add the caveat that you would be we are requiring you to work with local authorities so they are aware of what's going on? Because I mean, at the end of the day, they know their patch, they know organisations within their patch, and obviously the communities. You're talking about some deprived communities. So would there be that you'd need to share information with local authorities, because as Councillor Boyler said, they don't seem to have much information on this one. So I know Councillor Bird wants to come in and Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, very much along the lines of what Councillor Boyler said. At the cold spots, Walsall was probably freezing because we got no benefit whatsoever from the Commonwealth Games. Correct. We offered the judo to be at the university, they said no. So we got absolutely nothing. However, what I would say, this particular fund is probably something that I think is the best I've seen of the 70 million legacy. Purely simply because there are organisations out there, I don't know how Beth might have had any conversations with Walsall, but we have what we call our resilient communities model, which we found during the pandemic. We found 2,000 people that we didn't even know existed. And we've built on that resilient communities model. However, I do believe that the underlying strategic way this will be spent is an exceptionally good one. But I'm with Jim on this, that we don't know who the grant administrator might be. Again, is it possible that one local authority, I'm not saying Walsall, could be the grant administrator and be the accountable body for the money? I think what you've done is commendable. I think that all of the people out there and the story you give about John, or whatever his name is, I could replicate that with 3 or 4 in my own authority, that we've done something similar. If you look, we started an apprentice scheme about 5 years ago. We've now got, I think, 2 million or 2 million apprentices out into work. And that was just an initiative very similar to this, where you identify an organisation that they're doing great work but got no money to do it, and invariably they're doing it for peanuts. Some of them doing it for nothing, you know. So I think the idea is commendable. I still think on Jim's line we need to know who this is going to be and what is the criteria for buying into it.
I'd just like to offer the member from Walsall some reassurance that Walsall definitely did receive grant funding on the games, because I personally was passionate about making sure that happened. I can share some examples with you after the session if you'd like
to see.
I mean, there's fantastic people in Walsall that are very deserving.
Sorry, I didn't mean they didn't get grant funding, but let me make it clear. We had no input into the Commonwealth Games itself.
Understood. But again, just to offer my personal assurance that the intention absolutely is that all of the local authorities, constituent and non-constituent, do get a slice of this pie. In terms of the clarity on who the grant administrator is, I mean, ultimately, once that procurement process is concluded, of course, there could be a mechanism agreed for us to share the details of that organisation. However, my view is I am seeking assurance or approval ultimately from this forum that the process that we've undertaken, the procurement process being transparent and fair, and you're quite right, local authorities could have applied to be the grant administrator. Unfortunately, the process has now closed, and I would just gently remind members that all of their strategic directors were cited on this throughout that procurement process. So the opportunity for you guys to have been that administrated quite right, yes, could have happened. However, the real impact in response to somebody's question from earlier, the impact of not having approval on this today is we will not be able to get this programme out in September. The emphasis on capacity building, reaching the unusual suspects, like the story with John, like some of the fantastic people that are doing work in Walsall, those people need months of hand-holding, of engagement, of detailed work to be able to design the programmes that meet the needs of their own areas. And I can only say, if we push this beyond September, as soon as you get close to November, December, you're into Christmas, we'd be realistically looking at January, February at the earliest. So I really, passionately feel that we do need to go live with this in September. I am happy to move forward with the caveat that we provide the information of who that grant administrator is when selected. But for me, this is more about providing you with clarity of what that process was, and for you to confirm that you're happy with that open, transparent process that was ultimately run.
Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, Chair, but can I just ask Beth to let me know who you spoke to at Walsall? Just drop me an email.
Sure.
I'll have a word in there now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Running out of time.
Yeah, I think if this had been devolved to local authorities, we would have been concentrating on.
It's just an FM.
But we would be delivering stuff alongside stuff that we're doing on childhood obesity for a start, because I would imagine every other local authority is in the same boat on that. And also mental health. I mean, all you hear from young children, youth, is that mental health is a real problem for them. And I think the other thing is that what youth involvement are we going to have in relation to this? You've got a youth WMCA, but there are youth community involvement down at local authority level. What input are they having into the delivery of this funding?
Could I also just, in final response to Councillor Boyle's earlier point, again, as part of the engagement that we've done with the strategic directors of the local authorities, more detail on the scoring criteria and all of the thematic priorities that sit behind that has also been shared. Again, I'm really happy to provide that information to any of the individuals that have asked questions in the room today. But my strong feeling is we have really tried to prioritise consultation on this over the last 3 to 4 months. I think it is unfair to suggest that the local authorities haven't been consulted with on it. I am, again, very happy to provide information of any of the individuals that I have personally spoken with or that my team has spoken with. And I can apologise that the detail isn't sufficient for you within the paper, but it ultimately, I can again reassure that it does exist and that it has been shared with local authorities.
Gary.
Can I take Beth's point about the granular level of the grants? Really good presentation. Can I just suggest that perhaps a way through this is we go through the appointment process, we get a report back on it, and then we get that administrator to report to this board every 3 months or however long a period. So we can actually then have some oversight of how the process is going and some feedback on where those grants and monies are spent.
Whole program. I was going to ask for ultimately a full report on each of the individual programs, a report back in a period of time, right at the end, once we've got through the whole process.
It gives members reassurance that we've actually got.
There will be a request at the end. There will be a request at the end of all of these to then have a full report on progress for all the items.
Well, my questions answered.
Yeah, and then we move on. We're moving on. We're moving to a decision. That's the question.
No, I've put those things down on the table about the different priorities and youth involvement. Yeah, they haven't been answered.
Sorry, apologies. Would you mind just reiterating the question?
I was talking about how we're going to address childhood obesity, where it's going to be bigger in there. Mental health. You've said mental health in there, but what, where are the outputs going to be? How are we going to ensure that they're being delivered against some of the programs already out there, and also the involvement of youth in terms of the delivery of this program?
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words, that they're in the decision-making process. Why shouldn't they be?
I could not agree more. Again, within the detailed objective setting, which influences the scoring criteria that Councillor Boyle was referencing, there is direct reference to youth engagement, youth voice and involvement. There is reference to mental health. There's a real clear link between mental health and physical health, including physical health indicators like obesity. Again, I'm really happy to share that detail with you after the session, but it is absolutely in there. The other thing that's worth noting is, as part of the design of this, we took all of the evaluation outcomes from the games itself. There are 10 plus different evaluation reports that set some benchmarks in areas like physical activity or lack of in some cases. That will become the benchmark for the ongoing evaluation of this programme moving forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Simpkins, last question.
I ask how many cabinet members you've contacted with regards to this? Why is it we're just finding out the local authority then can be the administrating body? We already have internal and external auditors to make sure that it's done. I do think that this is again all add up. Have you aligned any of this with the UK Prosperity Fund and the community grants, so as we could get that across just as well? I think it's really important also that you bring along that, well, we've got a volunteer council sector. So have you contacted them? No, this is about volunteers, this is about communities, and it really needs to do that. We need to make sure that everything sort of marries up with the other, so we can get the best out of the spend. But just saying today, and when we come to the meeting, that local authorities could have bid for it, but the bidding's closed, isn't very helpful. And again, I feel like I'm being benched into decision making. This is 10 million quid. Who's going to be audit this? Who's going to be accountable? What happens if it goes wrong? All that is in place in local authorities. Just missed a trick, and it's going to cost us more money.
I can't account for why local authorities aren't aware that they weren't able to bid. Again, ultimately, I can only say we did engage directly with the strategic directors. I can only apologise that ultimately didn't transpire. In terms of cabinet members, the main individual that we've engaged with is Councillor Carmichael. I personally am an officer of the Combined Authority. I haven't, the first time I'm meeting yourself. I would say, I would reasonably think that having engaged with those very senior members of your teams, that some of that would be translated back on the local authority side. But again, I apologise that clearly hasn't happened.
I think that point is something for you to take up with your officers when you go back to
With all due respect, Chair, shouldn't they be the combined authority that liaises with local authority elected members? As even leaders, I had foresight of this, and cabinet members who actually deliver these services would have had the foresight to have asked these questions, or the common courtesy just to be consulted. It's ad hoc again. Everything in the combined authority is ad hoc.
Can we pick this up outside of the meeting? I would like to move to a point where we agree if we are prepared to approve the 10.5 million proposal in front of us, approve delegation delivery of the grant programme, and approve in advance the at 3 cash payment profile for important grants. So are members prepared to approve the item?
No, I won't, definitely not. And I'll just make the point. I made the point before, I'll make it again. I never said, and I don't want to be misquoted here today, I never said the local authorities hadn't been involved in this. I read out very carefully what I was reported back that said, put bloody glasses on now, sorry. We've requested the detail behind the grants, which is yet to materialise. In this paper, as it only states aims, objectives, and the paper still hasn't set out that it will work closely with Coventry's Culture, Sports and Arts Service or any similar department within the local authority. And then there's a question about proposed governance, which you've tried to answer, but you can't because no decision has been made. We're not making a decision on that today because there'll be no decision to come back to make on that once we've agreed this grant goes forward. So no, I won't be supporting it.
Just to clarify again, the procurement process is still live. That's why officers, nobody knows at the moment who. Yes, but it is now, we're now moving to the point of appraising those people who have submitted tenders for that process, but we haven't made a decision yet about who that's going to be. So that's why I'm describing it as still live, and it's why Coventry officers and other officers and even ourselves, we don't know who that is, so we can't say yet who that's going to be, and we certainly can't say how the grant's going to be distributed because nobody's even had a chance to apply for those grants yet. So that's why there's a lack of information at this point. I think we can do two things. We can absolutely give 100% guarantee that we will talk to the team at Coventry more. We've spoken to them already, but we'll talk to make sure it gets exactly the right people and make sure that they are properly involved when that grant administrator is brought online.
And I think
I
that's the
think
same for all authorities.
the other additional suggestion, the amendment, if you like, the other additional suggestion this afternoon is that we should bring a quarterly report back to this forum in order to say where the grants are being spent, and we can commit to doing that as well.
Okay. So
I think,
will others now
sorry,
agree?
Chairman, can I just say, I think, not wishing to be pedantic, but I think it needs to come back as a standing item on each board. The reason being, 3 months is too long, because when you get 2 of those, 6 months, you're halfway down the line of having to spend the money anyway. So I think it could be a standing item on each agenda, grants administered, balance left outstanding, and, you know, that might be better. You'll be pleased to know I've got a meeting with Anshaw OBE at 12 o'clock, so I won't bother you anymore. But I do believe, and I want to make this in the minutes, I'm very happy and satisfied the way Beth has put this together. It's one of the best use of Commonwealth Games money, but it has to be made sure that it is administered correctly, as Jim said. And I'd like to know you've been talking to the local authority.
Right, are we ready to approve now? Can I take that, the nod? Are we, councillor Boyle, has that satisfied your questions, and would you be ready?
I'll just, again, we're agreeing reports and rather than verbal reports. So if a recommendation that says following the appointment of the grant administrator, local authorities will be engaged with as to how this is to be administered going forward within their local areas. I think if you do that, it covers some of the concerns that have been expressed. I think that would be wider agreed, some of the potential other reports coming forward today.
Move it, Jim, I'll second it.
I've moved it.
I'll second it.
Then take that on board.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, right, agenda item 12 then, finally.
Where's Bob anyway? They wouldn't really come to that.
I'll hand that over to Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to be clear for members and colleagues, this is a strategic outline case, not a full case that we're presenting today. I think particularly mindful of the conversation that we've been listening to, there's probably 3 things I would say that we've been doing pretty intensively from March 17th. The first is working on a detailed business plan based on the local priorities of each local authority. That's not quite complete, but we're very close to getting agreement on the detail of that. I think the second is around the assurance process and obviously value for money, and particularly mindful of comments that were made at the CA board around governance of the growth company, performance management and reporting, which I'm looking to update colleagues on today. And the third thing is really, if I'm very honest, I think it's reflected in all of the business cases you're getting today, which is this challenge of getting it right and getting it spent. And it is a real challenge, colleagues. So we are asking today for 2.5 million, the overall 13.4 Games Legacy Fund. So I thought Linda's terminology earlier on was quite helpful. Some of that is critical spend. Okay, so we're asking if you like for a down payment before all of the details complete. And some of it actually, ironically, is to go to local authorities. So 700,000 across each of local authorities to work much more collaboratively with the growth company. But inevitably, if we can't do that, then we are challenged in terms of the impacts that we can deliver over that period. Again, for colleagues, that it's worth saying that there's really two key things that this programme is doing. The first is working on conversion of an existing pipeline, which is still very healthy despite the economic headwinds we're all facing, and a pipeline of events and conferences. And the second is to develop a new international promotion programme based on changing circumstances and a new international strategy, which is being developed for the autumn. And it really focuses on four areas: profile and reputation, good jobs for local people, facilitating the regeneration of the built environment, and sustaining vibrant destinations. We have set out in detail what we're hoping to achieve from this programme, but it's important to understand that this is a business case, and the reason it's taking a bit longer than probably any of us would hope, that will encompass all of the funding of the growth company, including our commercial funding, the SPF funding. And frankly, colleagues, this is to try and make life easier for you. So we're not coming back with bits and pieces, and it's very difficult to understand how it all fits together and what people are getting for their money. So in summary, we're asking for approval of the strategic outline case. We're asking for 2.5 million to be agreed, 1.8 of which is to help us finalise the business case, but also to start delivering over the next 2 quarters for our local and regional colleagues against those priorities. And 0.7 of the 2.5 is to go directly to local authorities. We're already beginning to agree how those part, and it'll be very different, I have to say, in each local authority as to how that money would be spent. We will bring the FBC back to this board in October, but I do want to give this board some further assurances in terms of performance management and reporting, because I know he's left the room, but this was certainly something Councillor Bird was fairly exercised at the last investment board, and indeed at the CA board itself. So there will be regular reporting to the CA and individually to local authorities at both an officer and a political level. And that's obviously come from the comments from this board, comments from the CA board, and the growth company review itself, which of course you're all part of. And also the governance of the growth company has changed. So every local authority is now represented, will be represented hopefully from next week at the on the board. And our business plan will be agreed, I hope, in July by the Economic Growth Board, and will continue to update the Growth Board in the same way as I think Ed was suggesting around the Environment Board. So in terms of accountability of the growth company and our business plan, I think not sure what else we can do, frankly, in terms of that level of reporting. And the final point I would make, actually, colleagues, is a thank you really to both officers. And we haven't met all of the politicians, but we've met most of the politicians now across local authorities. A thank you for the support that we've had in trying to get what I accept is a lot of money, a very large and fairly complicated programme, moving at pace. And bear in mind, it was only St. Patrick's Day when we got the approval to move forward. So I think we're making a lot of progress, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Thinking?
We've got a pipeline of priority projects, and I see the growth company as assisting with that, and also actually helping in that assistance to draw in additional funding for investors from government or any other bodies to come there. I think it's really important that you do work really closely with local authorities to get the best of where we're delivering actually on the ground. And I think there's a strategy that needs to be built upon is our international profile of each individual constituent part that makes up that combined authority picture that draws the investors internationally. We need to look at that, at proposals coming forward. Really important for us to get that good quality jobs in all our localities, and that's important. So I would plead that the investments that come from private sector. The growth company facilitates that and helps and works hand in glove with local authorities. The other thing is what really needs to be is we need to branch out to see what the future skills would be. And I see the growth company having a role in there to bring that forward so as we can get the best. But we need to see what comes forward. I'm happy with the paper that comes forward, especially now that you've said that you're going to contact the elected members as well as officers. We need to be kept in the loop. That's really important. What I would ask for this is that the alignments of the priorities also marry up with the combined authority, especially investment board, as that extra information so we can make quality of decisions about the investments moving forward. That needs to, we all need to be singing off the same sheet, and I haven't seen that today so far, but hopefully this can be worked on and developed. But I welcome what the work the growth company done previously, because I was involved with a bit of it with Ian and his portfolio. So I welcome this, but again, we need to make sure the checks and balances are always in place.
Councillor Boyle.
Neil's been sitting here nervously for nearly 2 hours waiting for this report to come to us, and you're going to be slightly pleased, Neil. I think I just want to say, notwithstanding the comments we've made previously, I think the work that is going on behind the scenes and engaging with politicians, certainly in Coventry, and I suspect elsewhere, I think is to be commended. I think it's sort of could well be replicated elsewhere, and the fact that we've done that, I think, has ironed out some of the issues that perhaps, in fact, we did have in Coventry, but equally we still have going forward, because ultimately, to use Stephen's quote, this is about delivery, and it's about identifying not only those potential investors in places like the West Midlands, but actually helping to support some of our fledgling businesses and businesses that are already here that are looking to expand, are looking to gravitate potentially to new products, new technology in light of the changing circumstances in the particular business they happen to be in. And that is really crucial in terms of understanding the economic opportunities within the West Midlands. So I just say this, Chair, I look forward to working with Neil and pay tribute to Katie as well, because they are doing some good work. But as always, the test is going to be in the delivery, in whether or not economic opportunities have been landed. There are certain particular issues we have in Coventry we expect to see landed in the next few months, and I'm looking forward to that. And that means better jobs, as everyone has said, not just better jobs, but better paid jobs as well that are secure. And that ultimately is going to be the test for this investment and for our success, both as a region but as a growth company and a combined authority.
Councillor Hughes.
I think I'd accept that Samuel hasn't engaged sufficiently previously, nor benefited from the growth company. We were dubious about the amount of money that we're actually handing over, but the proof has got to be in the eating. We do need to be engaging with you. We need to build our strategy in relation to where we're going with industry in Sandwell. We need to get in line with the green economy particularly, and we need to find our place. We belong to the centre for manufacturing, and we need to know where we're going in the future, else we will be missing out. So we need to engage with you very closely.
Right, okay. I do know, I don't know if there's any other questions, but I do know now that the IP, the investment panel did ask for further information to know on the baseline data and the targets. Some of that you've obviously given, but I think when you get to the full business case, I think more is expected around baseline information data. So we know that's coming. I'm just So it sounds like we might have agreement on the investment board recommendations at 1, 2 and 3. So this is clearly the financing for the strategic outline case. Just double checking because we've got a figure there in brackets at the end of 1 over the next 2 years, and it's bracketed 21.8 million. And I'm just checking if that's right. I can see something that says 14.1 to me, and I don't know. Just that might be the whole,
That's
the
the whole thing.
entirety.
That's the whole thing.
That's the entirety. Okay. So is everybody happy to read that one? So, hooray! Item 12 is fully agreed. Thank you.
So we'll be finished by 3 o'clock at this rate. Thanks.
Oh yeah, well that's down to all of you. Agenda item 13 then, the social economy growth programme, phase 1. And Ed, is that, and then
That's me, Charles.
Charles Braxton, welcome.
Thank you.
Over to you.
So the social economy growth plan, this is £2 million worth of investment from the Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund, the start of the process of investing in the social economy. By that we mean the ecosystem that's been designed and developed to enable social economy organisations to grow. By social economy, we're talking about social enterprises, community organisations, cooperatives, trading charities, etc. The ecosystem that was being developed was the result of work by a social economy task group, which has been meeting since 2018, to identify what actions needed to happen to enable growth to take place. This deals with a small part of that ecosystem, looking at specialist business support and place-based development work, which we're calling clusters. The business support programme will support at least 160 social enterprises and community organisations through the period of this delivery, and that's out of the 8,000 organisations that exist across the region. So it's a range of support packages based on where each of those social enterprises are in terms of their journey. There are targets that we've set for inclusion of disadvantaged communities, minoritized groups, etc. And there are targets set in terms of the growth that we expect the programme to be able to deliver. Those growth targets are based on evidence we have from 3,000 social enterprises who've been through similar programmes over the last few years, which show a social return on investment of at least £3.50 something for every pound invested. The data that we have got is not perfect because it's gathered through different means, with different methodologies, from different programmes. So what we're actually quoting is the least, or almost the worst case in terms of return on investment. So there is potential to do much better than that. In terms of the other things we're trying to address with the business support programme is to address some of the things which are weak in the West Midlands. Things like the low percentage of social investment of social enterprises that go for social investment, so loan finance, which is considerably less than it is in the rest of the country. But where it does happen, there's a strong ambition. So there are fewer of them, but they're asking for much more money. The other thing we're trying to address is the survival rate of social enterprises in the region. Nationally, it's about 67%. We get beyond 5 years. Regionally, it's a bit less than that. It's about 62%. So we're trying to make sure that we have things in place that are going to try and address that as well. And we're also looking at procurement readiness as well as part of that programme for social enterprises to take advantage of some of the big investment opportunities that come across the region. In terms of the place-based clusters, we've settled on there being 8 in total from this investment fund. One of those will be funded by Power to Change, which is a funding body that is supporting us in the development of this. They've already picked where that is, which is Perrycommon and Perrybar and Erdington area through the Whitton Lodge Community Association. So that will be going live very soon with their funding, not from this pot. The other 7 place-based clusters, we need the local authority input into where those are. In fact, we want you to make the decision and give you the money to do that, and ask for your support in helping developing those clusters. The investment fund is to look at areas where there is some evidence of social economy activity taking place and an organisation at the heart of that who is very, very willing and keen. to see that grow and develop, who can work with us to bring together all of the organisations within that locality. And by locality, I'm talking something probably the size of a ward. To bring those organisations together and those communities together to decide what is right for their area in order to develop the local economy and use that as an investment case going forward to bring in some additional resources. So we have spoken to 3 local authorities already. Each of them have got a variety of options that they want to consider, but we're keen to talk to all the other local authorities as soon as we get approval of this programme to move that forward.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Thanks, Charles.
Any questions?
Okay. Any questions for Charles on this one? Councillor Simpkins?
Yeah, I welcome the strategy, but does this align with the Combined Authority strategy from 2008, or is this new or refreshed? The other question is it needs to link with the Regional Business Support Programme and Wolverhampton to receive, and all the other authorities receive, the appropriate share of benefits and outcomes and resources. We also need to make sure that it marries up with the UK Prosperity Community Grants element, and we need to ensure that there's a bridge between the two, because the community and businesses, and how will the CA ensure that this happens? So as we get that bridge that move out of the community into the business, that's progression and growth. So how will we ensure that that doesn't have to be benchmarked?
I totally agree with you on that point. The social economy task force that was set up at their request to be people from within the sector to tell us what they needed to happen. That social economy task force has now been changed to an advisory group. We'd very much like there to be representation from local authorities and the tie-ins with the Shared Prosperity Fund. Absolutely. We're already working with the people providing the mainstream business support. We've had conversations with those, so the replacement of the growth hubs, if you like, to ensure that their programs are accessible to social enterprises as well. And we'd like to have faith groups involved in the process as well, because they're an important bedrock of where a lot of this stuff happens. So yes, the advisory board will be put together, and local authorities will be invited to send somebody along to participate in that. So I'm very much in favour of that, as combining this thing together. We also are talking to the ECMS as well, because some of the programmes they're running at a national level. So Sandwell and Wolverhampton, for example, are benefiting from the Social Economy Boost Fund, but what about some of the other parts? What about Coventry? What about some of those others? So we want to have some conversation with the DCMS to make sure that we've got some coordination at a national level as well. So I entirely agree with you. I think the Social Economy Task Force has done its work as best as they can, and it did have local authority input into that at various stages as well. But going forward, this is 10% of the investment that is required to do the job. We want to make sure that we've got, we don't join up with everyone else. So I totally agree with you. Do that.
We note the evaluation allowance was quite low on.
Oh, yes. Yeah, what's there for evaluation is largely around looking at the work in the clusters, because we have no data at the moment to understand what that is. So it's kind of establishing a level of activity. The outcome from the clusters work is actually going to be a report from each of those clusters as to what the investment is. So we will know from that report just how much work has been done and what they're looking for. What's I think hidden from that number is within the business support program, which goes out to competitive tender, whoever the providers for that program will be required to report back data on a regular basis. So if there is any underspend or there's any fall down, we can identify that very quickly and decide what we want to do as a consequence of that. But we will get impact data on a regular basis from them, almost on a live basis. So there's probably at least as much again hidden within the
Okay, members, are we happy to? Sorry, members, are we happy to support this one? We will then investments from the legacy fund of 2 million. Yeah. At point 2, supporting activity that underpins these actions, 42k. Endorse the risk and investment appraisal recommendation. Right.
Thank you very much.
Item 14 then. Item 14 is a mobilising plan for the growth business justification case.
Those of you who don't know me, Paul Edwards, head of economic development and delivery here at CA. Members will be glad to know that I'm just the front man for the first 7 local authority officers here. So hopefully you feel fully appraised and involved in this. Authority leads business support have been throughout.
Can't hear you very well.
As a check. Apologies. So the context for this is that, as members will know, there's been a substantial reduction in regional funding for business support with the end of European structural funds. And as CA board chose to give UK Shared Prosperity Fund approximately 42 million allocated to regional business support to March 2025. As part of that, the local authorities are leading with the underpinning ecosystem support, so the basic business support April, and doing an excellent job of delivering that. One of the outcomes of that substantial reduction of funding is there are very few added value regional programs now existing. In fact, as of so through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, there will shortly be 2 large-scale regional programs announced. One is for industrial readiness and the other is decarbonisation, which local authorities will be heavily involved in both designing and making decisions around. So the paper that's coming forward today is effectively to say there are still gaps in that ecosystem to support our both our high growth businesses and businesses that have potential resilient issues going forward. So I'll highlight those 2 programs. One is a high growth accelerator program, which is to really look at indigenous businesses that have the most potential to grow. There is not currently one of those in the region. There are national programs that don't need businesses. And the other is a supply chain transition program, which is focused on moving some of our perhaps more traditional companies into other areas. So these are recommendations, as I say, from the Business Support Officer lead group. So this is not me making it up. So these in terms of gaps that we've got to take forwards. And in terms of what we should see revenue growth. We see approximately similar programs, see approximately 10-to-1 revenue growth scale and high value jobs. So that's which is the outcomes. We will propose to commission external expertise to deliver this. They're both very specialist programs and probably so I won't go into the detail, but to give a sense of the decarbonisation program, which has recently been awarded subject to standstill, that tends to be a mixture of local partners, including local authorities, but some national expertise as well, where that adds value. And in terms of the risks, I think monitoring how we make the change, this may sound like a lot of money, but it isn't a lot of money in terms of making the change to the West Midlands economy. The number of businesses going through it are relatively small. So what's important is that we really monitor progress, which has been a real theme throughout this meeting. So that's key to the success of this programme. And then the ongoing support for those businesses following March 25. The ongoing economy is £3.5 million to March 25. But actually, post March 25, what do we do? Happy to take questions.
Questions, members? Councillor Simpkins?
I think there should be another strand, and it should be productivity. And really do, because we suffer from low productivity across the West Midlands, and we need to make sure that that's a key component. I'm happy with the funds, but the funds again need to be aligned to the priorities from local authorities so they can tap into that.